done for. Everyone get out.
Greetings sailors and welcome to the final winners video. We've actually got both the second and first prize winners in one because one of them, this one, the second place, is a carrier game and I wasn't going to make you watch the whole thing, so I've cut it down quite considerably. This is DeadlyAngelPL in the tier 6 American carrier, the Independence, and he's running with the stock loadout of one air group of each kind. There's probably some easier way to say that, but anyway, I could have just gone the 111 loadout, but then you might have thought I was talking in binary or something. I don't know. Anyway, this is actually a tier 7 game, and there's obviously another carrier on the enemy team who is also actually an Independence, and we'll see what air group he's running later. But basically, if it's another stock air group, then they're going to be fairly evenly matched. If it's a air superiority loadout with 2 fighters and 1 dive bomber, then that might be slightly more problematic. But there are still ways of dealing with that. It just requires being more circumspect. Now, I'm not going to talk about carrier balance in this video at all. That's the subject for, that deserves its own thing. And I've talked about carrier balance previously. I did a video back in closed beta about the issues that are apparent. Definitely very, very apparent at this stage, especially at the higher tiers. But like I said, that's a subject for another video. He's actually going to use his fighters here for scouting initially, and yeah, neither of these destroyers turned off their anti-air, although they were probably going to get spotted anyway. So this is the point where you're going to see the power of manual torp drops, and even against a destroyer, which in theory has the very best chance against a manual torp drop, well, you'll see. Dive bombers, actually, you do see them being more often used against destroyers because destroyers don't have a lot of armor, so a dive bomber hit will do a fairly large amount of damage. However, a successful manual torp drop will do even more damage, yes. And he was trying to make the turn, but when you've got somebody in a carrier making when they're not screwing up their manual torp drops, then there's not a lot you can do about it. I've had that experience myself in destroyers, where you're manoeuvring and manoeuvring and manoeuvring, and your anti-aircraft armament is just not enough to significantly whittle away. And so you just get a manual drop that kills you. So he's taken out 1 destroyer, and I think he was prioritising destroyers to start with because, well, it helps out his teammates considerably. They're not getting torpedoes dropped on them from the flank, because this western end of the map is not looking good. They are significantly outnumbered right now. They've only had cruisers, whereas the enemy team had some of their battleships over here. And we did have a battleship, but as you can see, he died over on the eastern half of the map. So the remaining 2 BBs are Colorado and New York, pressing across to the west, but they're pressing across the middle. So Deadly is basically, yeah, he's doing what he can to help out his team here, and he spots the Matsuki still circling around this area. I think he's just dropped torps at that Colorado, and so another manual drop maybe? Now, the Matsuki looks like he's going to get away with it. Now he's dropped his torps. He sends his dive bombers in, and there's the enemy carrier's fighters, and I think the enemy carrier was also using a stock loadout, so he gets a bomb hit, and I think the Matsuki driver panics, because he starts to turn, and then turns into not 1, but 2 torpedoes, and that finishes him off. And if he just stayed a straight course, like he looked like he was going to make it, he looked like that was going to be fine, and instead he kinda messed up. Anyway, we're skipping on a little bit further, and at this point the west flank entirely dead. The remaining enemy destroyer is this Farragut, and Deadly Angel's actually taking damage from him right now. So again, sending out his planes. He's out of fighters entirely by this point, and the enemy carrier seems to have his fighters over in the west for some reason. So hits the Farragut with a bomb, hoping to set him on fire. Don't think he did, but if he had and the Farragut extinguished, well, anyway. So, and again he waits until he's going to have the flat side, and there's another devastating strike. So he's up to a first blood and 3 devastating strikes at this point, and he has lost a chunk of health, and they know where he is, but he's still alive. Now, because he was spotted, and yeah, you can see he's taking some fire there, but not very effective fire, the enemy carrier sends his offensive armament out, but that's a manual, not a manual drop, that's an automatic drop. Able to avoid most of those. He does take 1, does take a bit more damage, but the enemy carrier dropped those frontally, and Deadly had plenty of warning, so that was fairly easy. And you can see there this enemy independence carrier driver, yeah, just sat stationary on the back line. He's literally making this as easy as possible. So leading the way with the dive bombers, because dive bombers don't do as much damage, and you'll see carrier drivers do this a lot. They send their dive bombers in first as sacrificial pawns almost. They will try and bait away fighter groups with dive bombers, and you know, if somebody doesn't take the bait, you might hit somebody with bombs for a couple of K damage and set some fires if you're lucky. But in this case, and you can see the enemy carrier has lost most of his fighters as well. In this case, he's just purely using them as bait. And there's only a couple of ships left now, so taking this carrier down is very important in terms of bringing back the points in their favour. Now they do temporarily have both cap circles, and we have a Colorado that went back to, well, he kind of was in the middle and then he's gone back to defend the A point, and there we go, another devastating strike. He really could not have made that easier, that carrier driver. But the Colorado is going to do a pretty good job defending, and he keeps those 3 enemy ships tied up long enough that, yeah, there we go, they're capped, but he did a hell of a job there, and he alone probably made a significant difference in this being a loss, a win rather than a loss, rather. So we just lost the Aoba, but his final torp spread takes out the Cleveland, or was it gunfire from the, I think it was gunfire from the New York actually, but the Aoba, that final torp spread did a lot of damage, so it made the New York's job a lot easier. And at this point, well, they just have to stay alive. Now, the enemy Fuso and the Colorado, as you can see, they have to come through this, well, they've got to get south. They don't have a lot of time, and so they could have gone for the more open water approach even, on the 7 line. You can tell this is one of these days where I've had multiple attempts at recording. This is my best so far. Let's hope I don't mess it up. But that just means that he's, I mean, Deadly can see this. He's got to go through this narrow passage. That just makes it all the easier. Although, actually in the passage, well, you've got to either drop just before or just after if you don't want to do a head-on drop, which is by far the easiest to avoid. So he knows this guy is going to be holding a fairly straight course, and I mean, to be fair, the Colorado needed to go south, but it's not like he didn't have warning that there were planes in the air. But all the same, how are you going to avoid this? I mean, even if he turned, and there we go, there's a Confederate and a high caliber. Even if he turned, he would have taken some of those torpedoes, but as it was, he took most of them. So, or was that even all of them? Wasn't paying attention. So anyway, he's just been knocked out by the New York. That's another big chunk of points in their favour. So that was a good job softening up that battleship. Does, however, leave a Fuso and a Miyoko, and as you can see on the timer, we're actually pretty close to the end of this one. And there was a bit of back and forth and chat about, you know, well, we need to defend, and Deadly was pointing out even that at this point, much better just to stay alive, because we're ahead on points. We just need to stay alive. We don't lose any points from losing ships, and by the time the timer runs out, we're still going to be well ahead, even though we're not actively getting points from the B point. And that's enough to win. So sometimes, as I had in the recent supporter video, sometimes running away is how you secure victory. So that was 7 medals, quite a creditable performance. Maybe a little bit too creditable, I don't know. Like I said, carrier balance is definitely an issue. Nearly 4,000 base XP, 15 air kills, 4 ship kills, bunch of torpedo hits, quite a lot of torpedo damage, as you can see, over 100,000 torp damage. And it's maybe just the fact that not many carrier players knew about my contest that meant that the winner wasn't a carrier driver as well. And speaking of the winner, here he is. This is RambunctousRat, and he's in the Tier 4 Japanese cruiser. And by cruiser I mean destroyer. We're off to a good start here. The Isakaze. Now this thing is pretty stealthy. It's got 7km torps like the Minikaze at Tier 5. It's pretty fast, and it can be pretty devastating as well. And there's a reason why people say the mid-tiers are the kind of low to mid-tiers are the sweet spot for the Japanese destroyers in particular, because you can perfectly well fire torps from stealth. They're pretty powerful torps, and well, there's a lot of people not playing very well because they're still learning the ropes. So, yeah. I don't think it's so much... I mean, I think they kind of scale up relatively well. It's just players don't necessarily scale in the way that the game does. And this is just the nature of an online free-to-play game, I suppose.
Engine boost deactivated.
So, this is a top-tier game, and although he is alone over here, it doesn't really matter. He can just stay in stealth, and unless he gets spotted by an enemy destroyer or an enemy aircraft, he's probably going to be okay. Actually, it looks like both carriers, and there's actually 4 carriers in this game. They're all kind of dancing with each other at the moment, so there's no danger of being spotted by anything. And there's also no spotter planes, really, at Tier 4. I don't think any of the cruisers or battleships get that capability until Tier 5, so again, he really doesn't have to worry about aerial detection, and it looks like he doesn't have to worry about being detected by any other destroyers as well. So this Phoenix is just sailing in a perfectly straight line, and to be fair, if he's got the situational awareness captain skill, which everybody should have, no excuses, everybody should have that on every ship. Maybe not the Tier 1s, but you know, every ship. But maybe he assumed he was spotted by something else, because we can see there's a Tenryu that's coming round into the open, somewhat foolishly, along the sea line, and yeah, he just, I don't know. I mean, if there's nothing around and suddenly your situational awareness thing pings off, you know there's a destroyer nearby, and that's when you start taking evasive maneuvers. But sometimes it's not necessarily clear, and their very first indication that there was a destroyer up here was that one of their number just got obliterated. So you'd think this would make the rest of them a lot more cautious, right? Well, it kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. And I think it's entirely possible to get away with things at these tiers that you wouldn't at higher tiers, just because people are paying a little bit more attention, and they are maybe doing a bit more of the old pattern recognition, but not necessarily. And I've played a lot of World of Tanks, and I know that's true in the higher tiers of World of Tanks as well. You see people doing things that you think, is this a Tier 2 battle or a Tier 10 battle? Because sometimes, just based on the player behaviour, you honestly can't tell. So he makes another drop against that Wyoming. They know there's a destroyer here by that point. They've had fair warning. That Phoenix got blown out of the water. So will this guy dodge these? Not really. No. No. I mean, no. Just no. And again, I don't think he's even been detected yet, but they knew he was here by this point. So he makes a drop on the St. Louis, but the St. Louis looks like he's running a parallel course to the edge of the circle, and he's probably going to be out of range of these torps before they get... well, if he's actually turning away, he's probably not even going to intersect the course. So he seems to have finally realised that, you know, oh, where's all my support gone? Where's all my teammates gone? So he's turning away just because he's now alone. And also he's maybe thinking, maybe I should take evasive manoeuvres because there's clearly a destroyer nearby, which is not something that Wyoming driver was doing. Now, Rambunctious absolutely does not want to get spotted while he's near a St. Louis, because while the St. Louis is slow, and therefore vulnerable to torpedoes, and yeah, it's unlikely this spread will hit, but he's got nothing else to immediately drop on. And the reload on these is good enough that it's, you know, you can afford to take a few speculative drops. But the, yeah, it's slow and vulnerable to torpedoes, but if you get spotted by a St. Louis, then your life will suddenly turn very painful indeed, because the rate of shells they can, the rate of fire they can get with their HE shells is, yeah, pretty good. And actually the low tier German cruisers, the Tier 2 and the Tier 3, basically the same thing. But I don't think they have quite as much fire chance on their shells, which is the theme of the Germans generally, unfortunately. Yeah, sneak preview of the German cruisers. I'm not particularly impressed, I'm afraid. But anyway, yeah, that video will be coming fairly soon. I might even... my plan was to finish off all of the Russian DD videos, but I might actually do my German overview video and then continue on with the Russian DD gameplay video. But we'll see, I haven't decided yet. So this is, again, a bit of a speculative drop. This is pretty much at the very far edge of his range for these torps, so they might run out just before they hit the Myogi, but it's a stationary Myogi, so it's a very juicy target, and you can't really ignore it when somebody's doing that. That's just too tempting. And running aground like that in the open, yeah. The Myogi's not the fastest ship, and looks like one ran out, but two actually make a hit. No kill, so no more medals, but extra damage, which is always nice. But yeah, I mean, it's possible. You can be distracted if you're being chased by somebody, for instance, or you're having to make a fighting retreat. And I've done this myself. There's a couple of maps where there's just like one little island out in the open, and it's like, well, you don't notice it because your concentration is all on what's going on behind you. But in this case, I'm not quite sure how the Myogi managed to end up in an island. So paying attention to the minimap absolutely is an important thing in warships, even more so perhaps than in tanks. Because if you run aground like that, generally speaking, it's not going to go very well. So he pops out some smoke. I'm not sure if it was more meant to help him or to help this friendly Wyoming, but this guy's, again, right out in the middle of the open and vulnerable to a lot of enemy fire there. So he is probably not going to last very much longer. There's also at least one enemy ship that looks like he's AFK, by the way, a St. Louis. All the way down in, well, he's actually in between 4 map squares. It makes it very awkward to say which map square, but he's around the GH line, sort of over by the 8 and 9 column. So, yes, he may be important later on, I don't know, but generally speaking, you know, at this stage in the battle, if it's kind of 2 or 3 minutes in, it might just be somebody's taking a really long time to load in. Sometimes I take kind of 2.5 minutes to load in, and it's really annoying, but by the kind of 8-minute mark, yeah, I think they're just AFK and botting and whatever. So some more torps out. I think this was another fairly speculative drop. The Wyoming is heading towards him, but that makes it easier for him to dodge if he sees these coming. And actually, he loses at least 1 torpedo to an island there. Which doesn't sink, unfortunately. Island's OP, as we all know. Well, Island's definitely OP. I live on one, I should know. But, you know, it was worth making the drop again. And it looks like he's turning, so I don't think those will hit. No. But, yeah, the reload on these... I mean, actually, maybe with the way, you know, with the contest, not only favouring destroyers, maybe I actually favoured the kind of the mid-tier and low-tier destroyers, because... they can get the torpedoes out much more quickly, whereas the high-tier destroyers have a much longer reload time on their torps. You're talking kind of anything up to 1.5 minutes, and yeah, you can put out a lot of torps at once, but it maybe limits your capability to get a lot of those devastating strikes. So he's spotted here. He's well within the detection range of the Wyoming by, what, 300-400 meters? Something like that. So being aware of your own concealment range in this game is quite important, and I think it's actually a lot easier to understand how detection works in Warship as well, because there is one single value, whereas in World of Tanks it's kind of a function of not only your own camo value, but somebody else's spotting value. There's a whole bunch of modifiers like crew camo skills and camo paint and bushes or whatever, and then you've got the spotting checks to consider, and then you've got the different you know, the detection points in your tank versus the spotting points on the enemy tank, and it's all very complicated and sometimes it can give results that you don't understand. Whereas in this game, basically, if you're detected, I think you're detected then for, is it 20 seconds before you drop off somebody's radar again. And at least when you fire, I'm not sure if it's the same for being just spotted due to proximity. But anyway, and the things that modify it, like the camo paint, like the captain's skills, they actually now display that information in the port. So you can add camo paint to your ship, and you will see your concealment value will effectively increase, because your detection range will decrease. So it's not a function of the spotting power of an enemy ship versus your ship. It's only purely a spotting, a function of that concealment value. And one important thing to know is that apparently, and this is a relatively recent thing that I learned myself in the course of researching the Russian destroyers, is that there's a kind of a fixed additive distance to your concealment when you actually fire your guns. And that's particularly important to know for the Russians, because that's what the Russians are about. This Wyoming, by the way, dodged the first torp drop. Not sure if it was intentional or what. And I don't know if he just got complacent, but yeah. RIP. So there's another devastating strike. So basically, it's a function of caliber of the guns. When you fire your guns, it adds X amount to your detection range every time, regardless of nation or tier. It's just the caliber, and that's why those Russian DDs are particularly good at invisi firing from stealth. So they are to guns what the Japanese are to destroyers, torpedoes rather, with the destroyers. I know what I mean. Occasionally you might even figure out what I mean as well, you know, if I'm lucky. So yeah, it's all about knowing the magic numbers, and for most destroyer captains it's just going to be that base detection range. But if you're planning on firing your guns from stealth, you've got to know the detection range plus how much firing the guns adds. And for a lot of destroyers that puts it outside of the range of the guns entirely, but not for all. And actually I think some of the higher tier Americans can do it as well if you've got the appropriate upgrades. Anyway, this St. Louis, I mean, the Wyoming might have just been complacent, might just have thought, okay, the destroyer's gone away, I don't have to worry. This St. Louis had so much time to kill his speed, to turn in, to avoid these. He actually saw RambunctousRat making a getaway. He fired a volley in his direction, and yes, Rambunctious put off smoke, but that absolutely was... Yes, that was somebody who was not very experienced at this game, and Rambunctious was able to take full advantage of that. So that's another devastating strike. He's up to 5 medals now. He needs at least 2 more and really good XP, or he needs to get kind of 8+ medals in order to be walking away with the Tirpitz, which, you know, he has done, so we'll see which it is. So he has to be a little wary about it being detected from the air, but it doesn't look like these planes are going near him. The Hosho coming up here is interesting as well. It might be this guy had an eye to... It might be he was following up behind friendlies with an eye to capping, basically. And it's always nice to see a carrier that knows how to move their ship. And the Hosho is a bit more capable of it than the Langley, which is just horrendously slow. But as it is, he's just sailing nicely into range of Rambunctious. Now, Rambunctious has managed to run aground, but he's not spotted yet. He's also putting torps out because the guy's just coming into torp range. But this guy, this Hosho driver, is not just sailing in a straight line. He's actually, you will see from him, steering his ship. I don't know how much was the thought that there might be torpedoes nearby, or if it was just manoeuvring to avoid fire from the Tenryu, and possibly torpedoes from the Tenryu. But either way, the best steering of anybody to avoid torpedoes in this game, you will see from that Hosho driver. So yeah, it's sometimes like it's not the people you expect to be paying attention that seem to be paying attention. But like I said, it might have been some other factor entirely. So he's spotted now. This guy's within his detection range, and he's going to be even more aware now that, you know, if he had no inkling there were torpedoes in the water before, he's going to know it now. So Rambunctious actually spreads his torps out quite a lot here, and then opens up with his guns, because at this point you might as well. However, being spotted means the St. Louis that was coming up the 4 line gets a couple of hits in. And fortunately for Rambunctious, well, he's able to get behind an island very quickly again. But still, that was a nasty little moment there. So, the Hosho driver completely avoided all those torpedoes. That was some nice driving, but it doesn't matter, because he's in perfect range to get hit by Rambunctious's guns. And although the guns on the Isakaze aren't very good, and got to be careful of that St. Louis, although he does appear to be engaging our carriers at the moment, so that's not too bad. But yeah, if you are against a carrier like this, you might as well. You have to sail in a straight line to do it, which is not really ideal, but on the other hand, what was going to shoot back at him? Because there really wasn't anything. So that's St. Louis, that's AFK. Yeah, we're running out of time now, by the way. I've got a Tenryu engaging the Langley, but the Langley's still got torp bombers left, and this St. Louis that's going for the cap, well, he really needs to be dealt with, because we could run south, we could try and get the Langley and the AFK St. Louis, but who would stop this St. Louis from capping? Because there's really not a lot of this team left. I mean, it went against them for a while, and I think largely due to Rambunctious's efforts, they pulled it back. Well, we're down now to 3 versus 3, and both of them are St. Louis's. Both of them are quite dangerous. And also the Langley. So if the Langley goes after him with torpedoes, maybe that could be a problem. And there we go. He's actually being spotted from the air right now. And that St. Louis is awfully close, by the way. But still concentrating on the carriers. So it's not like he has to turn his turrets round to start taking shots at Rambunctious, but just he's oblivious. And he's starting to turn. He's just realised, but it's all too late. So, I mean, this is the last kind of immediate threat down. And there we go. High caliber. And a devastating strike. Actually, I think he got the high caliber from the carrier, didn't he? Or am I just... No, I don't think he did, actually. I think that was the Confederate from the carrier. Anyway. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8 medals. And there we go. So 8 medals. That's what it took to win this this particular contest. I'm not saying I'd do it this way again, but still I think this was a reasonably impressive result, at least in terms of medals. Now he's not going to get any more. And as you can see, we've skipped on a bit because Rambunctious is the last ship that isn't a carrier left. It's really on him to try and kill these enemies because this is just a regular game. There's no victory point counter at the top there. It's either win by killing everything or capping, and they don't have enough time to cap. And I kind of made a bit of a gaffe in the supporter spotlight video. I was talking about it felt like that domination mode had converged a bit with regular game mode because you can now if you cap all the victory points, you win in domination mode. But of course, the victory point counter still is a rather big difference between the two. So I was talking maybe slight rubbish there, maybe slight rubbish, maybe. Never happens, right? So he doesn't have the torp range for, I think, either of these ships. He might just be in torp range of the Langley, but this is the last 30 seconds. He's not going to do this. He was also trying to maneuver to avoid those torp bombers. And the Langley, I think, was using the threat of those to tie Rambunctious up, which is actually absolutely what you can do with torp bombers in particular, because they are so powerful, is you can use them, even if you don't drop them, you can use them as area denial. You can force people away, but of course it runs the risk of them getting shot down in the process. But as it is, there's just not enough time. I think the Allied carriers were all out of planes as well, so that obviously made a difference also. So it was a draw. And this is why I think the medal hunt contest has kind of worked and kind of not. It favoured one particular class and one particular grouping of tiers over all others. In fact, one particular nation over all others. But it, you know, maybe next time if I do this again and I drop that, you know, just make the devastating strikes only count once, well, we'll see a much kind of more even spread, because things like damage and XP, well, XP is really dependent on win, but damage maybe not necessarily so. But I don't know, it's difficult designing contests, it really is. So a big congratulations to RambunctousRat for winning first place, and a big congratulations to DeadlyAngelPL for winning second place, and a big thank you to Wargaming for providing me with these prizes to hand out to celebrate the launch onto the open seas of Warships. And although I think it's early days for this game yet, although it's definitely not in a perfect state by any means, I have a good feeling about this. I like the pace of it. I like the style of gameplay, and we'll see how it goes in future. So, if you've enjoyed this, if you think our winners did a good job, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.